Have you ever wondered why your wedges don't perform the way you want them to? It might not be you. It might be the bounce and the grind you have on your wedges. I'm Matt, and this is the Bogey Depot. Today we're breaking down wedge grinds and wedge bounces. Are they different? What are they? Why do they matter? And how do you pick the right one for your game? The latest change in my bounces and grinds has revolutionized my short game. It's made me a lot more confident. It's allowed me to hit the shots I want to, and it's keeping me from blading and chunking balls. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to keep you from blading and chunking your wedges. So what is a wedge grind and what is a wedge bounce? Well, first, a bounce, I'm going to pull some examples over here. A bounce is this radius. And the wider this radius is, the bigger that number is, the more bounce it has, which means the distance from here to here, height-wise, is greater than something that has a low bounce, such as this club, that barely has any height difference between here and here. In fact, this one only has 4 degrees, imperceivable to the naked eye. Where the first one I showed you, this Cleveland, it has 12 degrees from here to up here. And this club will keep you from chunking balls. This club will allow you to do a lot more around the green, allow you to work better in firmer conditions, and it just allows you to be a little bit more creative. So we have what we call high bounce, this Cleveland in the 12 degree. We have low bounce, this Vokey in a 4 degree. And we even have mid bounce, which I have in this Cleveland in 10 degree. And each one of those brands, as you can see there, offer multiple options. Right here, I have a couple Clevelands and a Vokey. Actually, I think I have 2 Vokeys and 4 or 5 Clevelands sitting over here. And each one of them names their grinds kind of differently. And people like Vokey, they use letters. This Vokey here is a low bounce and it is a T. The Vokey high bounce is, there's a couple of them. There's F, there's K, and those clubs have more bounce on them. And then they have mid bounces like S. And why are they F, S, and T? High bounce is F, meaning full. No, but it does in Cleveland. Mid means S, standard. No, but it does in TaylorMade. Low is T is tight. I don't know. But no, that's not what they mean. They're actually named after people. I used to know what some of these are. I do know the S grind by Vokey is named after Stricker. There's also a low, kind of a medium low bounce version called the M grind, and that was named after Mickelson. So the S and the M, I know who they were named after. I'm not sure who these other ones were named after. But TaylorMade, they use a more conventional naming kind of progression. They have more bounces than this, but generally their high bounce is the HB, their mid bounce is the SB for standard bounce, and their low bounce is the LB for low bounce. So they have high bounce, standard bounce, and low bounce. Cleveland's not a lot different. Cleveland has what they call full as their high bounce, mid is their mid bounce, and low is their low bounce. They also have, some of these brands have in between numbers, so nothing specific. You may get a high bounce that's 12, you may get one that's 11, you might get one that's 14. Mid, I would say the mid bounce is more of that 9 to 10 range, anything maybe 11, that high bounce 11 or 12 and above. And then anything really under 9 is probably considered a low to a mid-low bounce, and then you get the low bounce in like the 6s. And Cleveland has one, so they don't even name this after a high, medium, or low because it used to be called a mid-low, and this is what they now call a dapped grind, which we'll talk more about later about why it is what it is and kind of how it is. So it's a generalization, but they're all over the place. And the number on the bottom doesn't always tell the truth either, if this can make things more confusing. You have the Tiger Woods 60 degree by TaylorMade that is an 11 bounce. Yes, it's an 11 bounce. I don't have one here with me, But you can see here, this is the full bounce on this club right here. And you can see that it has a good bit of distance from here to the, basically where the bounce changes and the grind starts. And in the TaylorMade Tiger grinds, that distance is only about 1/8 of an inch. So there's 11 degrees in that first 1/8 of an inch, and then it goes back to basically nothing after that. So it's a little more deceiving. It's a very tough club to play. There are a couple guys on tour I know that have played it. I know Morikawa tried it at the beginning of the year this year, and he used it for a while. I'm not sure if he's using it anymore or not. I know he went away from it. I don't know if he brought it back, but there's some interesting things with wedges. But if you can remember that 11 and above is kind of high, that around 10-ish is mid, and that 6 is low, and then there's some variations in between, you'll kind of understand what these bounces are. What is a grind? And I'm going to pull this Vokey back up again. And if the bounce right here is only 4 degrees from here to the top of the club, to the, the highest point of the bounce, the grind is this area in the back right here. And what happens is, instead of this going the whole way back like it does on this Cleveland, you can see there's nothing ground off this Cleveland. It goes the whole way from the front to the back using that, I think it's 12-degree radius, using that 12-degree radius. This does not happen when you grind a club. When you grind a club, you take some of it away, and that's what happens here. The back half of this club, the sole here has been ground off on purpose, so it creates some more opportunities for better players. You can also see the front of this. This is a little tougher to see. It's ground off on the toe, and it's a little ground off on the heel too. And I have some other examples here that do that, but that's what a grind is. A grind takes more off the toe, off the heel, and then off the back of the club, as you can see on this Cleveland also. So that gives you kind of what grinds are and what bounces are. So what are they used for? So a high bounce club is usually good for really soft turf. A high bounce club keeps from digging into the ground. It kind of, it stays on top of the ground. You got a lot of surface area there. You got a lot of roundness that really helps that. High bounce wedges are good for, like we said, soft turf, but also bunkers, which are like soft turf. And the reason they're good for bunkers is the kind of same thing. It keeps you from digging deep in a bunker. When you're in a bunker, you actually never really hit the golf ball if you hit a correct bunker shot. You hit behind it, and the sand actually throws the ball out of the bunker. And the more bounce you have on the back of that club, the better, because it keeps you from digging deep down in the sand. It keeps you nice and shallow in that sand and throws a lot of that sand out of there. And it's also better for steeper swings. If you have less bounce and you have a very steep swing, you're going to dig into the ground, and that's going to cause you to hit the ball on the top of the face, which is not where you want it. Where if you have a steep swing with a lot of bounce, it's going to come in and it's going to kind of hit the ground, and it's not going to dig as deep, and you're going to hit the ball more on the middle to lower end of the face, which is where you want to. Low bounce, it's better for firmer turf for that same reason. I guess I can keep that same club in my hand. If you have firm turf, you're going to hit, if you have a lot of bounce, you're going to hit and you're actually going to bounce. And when you bounce up, you're actually going to hit the middle of the ball and you end up blading it. Where a low bounce club, what it'll do is when you hit the turf with it, it's not going to bounce as much. So when it comes up, you won't blade it and you'll still get underneath the ball and be able to hit the ball in the air. So that's why a low bounce club is better for, kind of firm turf. The same thing with shallower swings. You get away with a shallower swing. You can get away with less bounce. And then there's the mid bounce, which is really what a lot of people say it's good for most golfers. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think high bounce is good for most golfers. Mid bounce is good for your mid handicap golfers that want it in a high lofted wedge. So your L wedge, I think a mid bounce is a really good grind for a mid handicap golfer in that situation. Some other things we have to talk about is what exactly does the grind do? Well, the grind on a club, I'm going to pull this Cleveland Adapt grind. So what it does is, if you can see from this profile, the front end of this is ground off. And what happens, or the reason they do that, is so you can have a toe down, and you're not going to clip the club face when you have a toe down. And like Tiger Woods, I know he likes to play a lot of toe down shots, where if you have a club that doesn't have any grind there, like this 54 here, it's going to really dig in, and it's going to defeat the whole purpose of having of toe down, because you're going to dig into the turf. What you want with that toe down is you don't want to dig into the turf. You want to hit the ball off the end of the club and kind of deadens it and makes a nice short little kind of chip shot with not a lot of speed on it. Some other things, if you take this Vokey grind here, this Vokey T grind, right? T grind, it has a lot worn off the back. That's so you lay the club flat and the front end doesn't get too high. Because if you lay it down and you see the front end really kind of stays underneath that golf ball, to where if you take something with more of a full grind, like this Cleveland here, and you try to lay it flat, look how high the leading edge of that club gets. You're going to blade it every time. That's why opening the face with a full face club just doesn't work out. What do you need for a shallow swing? Well, if you have a shallow swing, you really can get away with anything. A mid to lower bounce option is a lot better for you, because then you don't really need that high bounce option. If you have a steep swing, a low bounce option is going to be bad. You're going to dig in the turf. If you play in conditions that are firm, a high bounce club is not really good in firm conditions, because what will happen is, like I showed you earlier, it'll hit and it will literally bounce off the hard ground. So in Arizona or even in Florida or some of those places, and you end up blading it, and that's not good. So you want to stay away from that. But in soft conditions, to keep you from digging, you really want that. You really want that nice high bounce, wide sole that keeps you from digging. Also, shots you play. We talked about flop shots there. You need a low or mid-low bounce club to play flop shots. You have to have that relief off the back, and a lot of those lower bounce clubs, there's some exceptions. The Vokey low bounce K grind, not the Vokey K grind, the Vokey low bounce K grind. It has a big sole. It's a little bit harder to open up because of that. You still can, because there's not a lot of camber underneath there, but it's kind of an interesting club. But a lot of these clubs that have like this 8 bounce here, I think this is an 8 bounce, yeah. This 8 bounce has a lot of material off the back. It allows you to kind of lay that face open and hit a nice flop shot. Bump and runs, I would do something more like a mid or a full bounce, and you can see here's a good mid bounce option. This is in what Cleveland used to call a 2-dot, which then turned into a mid grind, which is basically just a Vokey S grind. And actually, I say it turned into a mid grind. They actually have changed the mid grind since this. But that is your typical Stricker grind. I think it's a fantastic for bump and run. So that mid or that high / full bounce is fantastic. And we talked about bunker shots. That big, thick sole with a lot of bounce is fantastic. I say you got to get out there and you got to test wedges. Whether you want fit for wedges, the one thing about a wedge fitting is make sure you get it done on grass. A wedge fitting on AstroTurf is completely pointless and useless. Everything bounces on turf, so you're always going to blade everything, and it's a tough. You basically have to hit the ball perfectly every time. Where on real grass, we don't have that problem. So I would make sure you get fit. When you do get fit, make sure that surface is similar to what you usually play on, or the average of the type of turf that you play on. And I'm a big fan of just testing different wedges out. You're going to have to buy and sell some. That's just the way it is. And that's what I've done. And I've found some things I like. And as I graduate to a different kind of golfer, I like a different kind of wedge, a different kind of bounce, and a different kind of grind. Some common mistakes golfers make when buying wedges is they just grab one off the rack. Hey, this Vokey looks badass. Yeah, well, there aren't a lot of people that can play this 4-bounce Vokey, me included. I couldn't play this club. It doesn't have enough bounce for me. I'm not good enough to hit that club. My hands around the green aren't that good. And now I could use it. I'm just not going to, I'm going to blade balls and I'm going to chunk balls. I'm going to do that kind of stuff with things. So I really think you need to make up your mind and have an idea when you head in to buy new wedges, what you're going to do. I also would never carry 3 wedges of the same grind. Well, why is that? Well, you want a fuller sole, bigger bounce for the most part for your 50 degree, your 48 if you're carrying that, or 52. And then as you kind of increase the loft, you can decrease the bounce. And the reason you do that is so you can open it up and manipulate the face a little bit. If you're a square face player all the time, a mid and high bounce is perfect to have in everything. There's nothing, if you don't manipulate the face, to me, I don't understand why you would ever have a low bounce. Even in firm conditions, a mid bounce, if you're hitting square shots, is where you want to be. And a lot of times, depending on how high that bounce is, if you start to get to 14, you might have a problem. But even at 12, I don't think you're going to have a problem on hard ground unless you have a really, really, bad golf swing where you hit behind the ball a lot. I don't know what else to tell you by a good bit. So I think each wedge has its specific use. I used to use a full in my lowest loft in my 50 degree, then a mid, and then I actually used a mid low for a while in my lowest one. I never even used low. In fact, I don't even use low right now. I use a mid low. And another mistake a lot of people make is choosing the grinds based on what the pros use. Phil uses an M grind or a similar version of that. Well, I'm going to use that, or, I want to get the TW grind. The TW grind is a tough grind to use. It really is. That is a tough grind to use. Make sure you're out there picking what's easy for you to use and what's good for you. Don't just go pull it off the shelf because you heard that Rory's using, an LB or whatever that is. I switched recently to 2 new wedges. I use a mid bounce in my 50 degree. And then I was playing, actually, ironically, a full in my 56 degree. And the reason was I wasn't manipulating the club face. So why would I want anything else? It's a great bunker club with full, and I say full because that's Cleveland, or a high bounce. And then I was playing a mid bounce in my 60 degree. And that's because, again, I didn't manipulate the club a whole lot, just a little bit. And that's what I needed. Well, I've started to manipulate the club more. I've started to get more into those shots. And I was blading a lot of balls with my 56. I like to chip with my 56, especially out of the rough. And if you I have both of them here, actually. If you look, the 56 that I was using, I was hitting for square face shots, which was great, but it had no trail edge relief. So when I changed to the mid bounce, you can see the mid bounce has some trail end, which helps you open that face up a little bit. It also has a tiny bit of heel relief, which you can see here. It's got a little bit of heel relief here. And then it's actually even got a little bit of toe relief, which is a change from the original mid bounce that Cleveland used to make, where it didn't really have a lot of heel and toe relief. And what I like about that is it really allows me to manipulate the club just a little bit around the greens and in the rough, but I still have that bounce there to be forgiving and keep me from chunking balls and doing that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy that mid bounce for my 56 degree, or quote unquote, my sand wedge. And then in my lob wedge, I went from, and I don't have my first one here, but I went from a mid, so what you basically just saw, to a mid low, which Cleveland calls an adapt. Let's see if I can show this to you, an adapt grind, or adapt. Yeah, it's an adapt grind. It's in an 8 bounce. And what it does is it has a little leading worn edge here, a little bit like the Tiger one, but not to the same extent. And you can see right about here, the bounce changes because it starts to get shaved off. And you have a little bit less and a little bit less, and it's even more shaved off in the back. But the big difference is there is a ton shaved off of this toe right here. So you can really get toe down, and there's a lot shaved off the heel. And what that allows is when you open the club face, look how flat that club sits, because it has so much relief here in the heel. If you don't have heel relief, like this, find the right one, like this 56, this has a little less heel relief, and you lay it flat, you can see how high that sits because it sits back on this heel. And it's even worse if you have a full, which is this one. If you try to lay a full open, I mean, that thing sits half an inch off the ground. So that's why I made those changes. And making those changes have helped my game, because in my 56, it's allowed me to manipulate the club a little bit. And if I want to get underneath something and open something up, I don't have to get my 60-degree out. I have a little more bounce underneath it. I can toe down with that 56 where it's not going to pop quite as high, which I really like. And it just is a more versatile club for me. The 60 has been the same. It's been fantastic because it does have this giant kind of sole, but the whole thing's shaved off a little bit. And it is so versatile. It's so easy to hit. It's just a fantastic club. I don't like full-faced clubs, but the way this performs, I'm absolutely fascinated by it. You can see I did not have a good chipping day the last time I was out. If I can show this to you here, I have a mark right here, which is high on the toe. Now I have some good marks down here in that second and third groove. Second's a little low. I actually remember hitting that one. I hit that on 17 yesterday, and she came in hot, but good thing she spun. And I do have a tendency to hit balls off the toe, so that's another reason this full face is really nice for me. So at the end of the day, it isn't about what the pros are playing. It's about what fits your swing and your course conditions and your shots that you like to play. You need to be picking out your bounce and grind. You may have to experiment. If you can get fit, that's great, but go out there and see what works best for you. And what works best today, like me last year at this time, was a completely different set of bounces and grinds than I have now. I've developed into a different player around the greens, and I've changed my wedges because of that. I didn't need new wedges because they were worn out. I needed new wedges because I knew it would help the way I'm playing. I really think that you need to put some thought into these wedges. And the more you understand bounces and grinds, the more it'll help your game. You may not be a bad chipper because you don't practice a lot. So that's probably the answer. But something that may not be helping you is just having the wrong grind and bounce in your wedges. Thanks for tuning in. Drop a like and a sub if you would. And let me know in the comments what you use and why you use it. I'm really curious. I like to have the banter back and forth and the understanding. Let me know what bounces and what grinds you're using, and even what brands you're using and why. I use Cleveland because they just feel good to me. I've never had great experiences with Vokeys. They're fine. I just like the Clevelands a little bit better. They seem to be more forgiving, and I've just always liked kind of how their grind's set up and some things like that. So let me kind of know everything below, and let's discuss it a little bit. I'm Matt. This is the Bogey Depot. Hit 'em straight.